Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Cabinet meeting. Just before I start, a couple of bits of information for future cabinets. One, there will be a portfolio holder reports, lead member reports updates coming to as a standing item on the agendas in future, and they'll get published on the web with the minutes. And I thought you might find that useful because it gives a degree of visibility to the work that's going on, not only with the cabinet members, but those portfolio holders who've got lead members working with them. So I hope you'll find that a useful addition. Also, just to make you aware that we have an additional cabinet meeting on the 29th of April to deal with a single item, and that's the St Mary's project. As you all know, we're out to consultation at the moment, and there's a piece of work to be done beyond that, pulling together the business case, and it will come back to Cabinet on the 29th of April, just so you're aware of that. So roll call today, we're all here. Peter Wharf, Vice Chairman, Ray Bryan, Graham Carr-Jones, Tony Ferrari, Jill Haynes, Laura Miller, Andrew Parry, Gary Suttle and David Walsh. And obviously when they do come to present any reports, I'm sure they'll take the opportunity just to say what portfolios they're responsible for. We've also got a number of officers in attendance today. Matt Prosser, Chief Executive, Aidan Dunn, Executive Director, Section 151 Officer, John Selgren, Executive Director, Place, Teresa Levy, Executive Director, Children's, Vivian Broadhurst, Executive Director, Adults, Jonathan Mayer, Corporate Director, Legal, David McIntosh, Corporate Director, HR and OD, and Kate Critchell, Senior Democratic Services Officer, and our meeting producers today, Pauline Weld and Judy Saunders. So apologies, Kate, I'm pretty sure we haven't got any, have we?
That's correct, Chairman, no apologies.
Thank you very much. And the minutes, colleagues, obviously when we get back in, is everybody content with the minutes as drafted?
Agreed.
And at some point I'll get to sign them. Thank you very much. I'll sign them when we get back to some level of normality. Declarations of interest? Anybody got any interest to declare at this point? No. And we'll go on to public participation. And we've got three questions, or two questions and a statement today. And what we'll do, as we always do, Matt Prosser and Jonathan Mayer will take it in turns to read the questions out. And there are two questions from John Colvert, and Matt's going to deal with those, and there'll be a response combining the two answers to the two questions. So over to you, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So question number one from John Calvert on item 10, Tourist Information Centre funding. The executive summary comments that TICs provide the following key services: free information, including maps, local attractions and events, general information about the local area, bus transport provision and information about accessibility, ticket sales for some transport providers and for local events, accommodation information and booking for the local area. As a resident of Dorchester, I've been trying to discover what decisions are being taken on my behalf. I eventually found recommendations about the Tourist Information Centre on the agenda for the Place and Resources Overview Committee and assumed there would be a constructive discussion, and so I asked a question about it. I was surprised, therefore, to see the identical document in the Cabinet Papers published only a few days later and before the Overview Committee had met. What happens if the Overview Committee changes the suggested recommendations, or is that not usually allowed politically? That's question number one. Question number two, also from John Calvert. As a resident of Dorchester for over 10 years, I've used the Dorchester tourist information for all these when they are available, and I use them in other towns every time my wife and I visit for the first time. This situation is not recent. There were plans for the TIC to go into the Shire Hall, but then there weren't. The obvious next place was for the new library, but no plans there. Finally, the reorganisation of the Corn Exchange surely offered possibilities. The response from Dorchester Town Council is sympathetic, but seemingly at an early stage. My question is this: if tourism is so important for Dorset, and in particular for Dorchester, why is the council stopping the funding and releasing the expert staff before agreeing a replacement service? Some transitional funding is no substitute for proper planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Can I invite Jill Haynes to respond, please?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Mr. Calvert, for your question. I'm Jill Haynes. I have the portfolio for Customer and Community Services. So I will reply to both your questions together, as we've already provided a response for the second question at the Place and Resource Overview Committee on the 25th of February, and the Council's usual practice is to just answer questions once. That said, I think this response is relevant to both questions. As you've rightly said, Mr. Calvert, the Cabinet papers were published before the Place and Resource Committee had considered its report. This was necessary because of the timing of the two meetings and the need to publish the reports in good time. But Cabinet are always keen to hear the views of the Overview Committee, and Cabinet members have received an update of the changes that were made to the recommendations in the report. Several members of the Overview Committee made the key point that Dorset's council role in relation to tourism is a strategic one. Our role is to attract visitors to Dorset, and we have a website, Visit Dorset, that aims to do just that. Several of the committee members referred to Visit Dorset and made suggestions about how we might develop this support further. This further to support our local tourism business, and I'm very grateful for that because we will be looking into that further. We will consider these helpful comments with colleagues who maintain Visit Dorset, and I will continue to work with the towns as we have discussed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response, Jill. The next question is from Rupert Hardy, and Jonathan Mayer is going to read it. Thank you. Jonathan, where are you?
Apologies, Chairman, I'm here now.
Okay.
Question from Rupert Hardy, Chairman of the North Dorset Group, Campaign to Protect Rural England, and it concerns the local plan consultation. Clause 2.7.22 of the local plan consultation says that Policy Dev 1 establishes a housing requirement for 30,481 new homes during the period 2021 to 2038, but also that discussions are taking place to establish whether there is a need for Dorset Council to meet an unmet need from Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole and from the New Forest. Council officers Hilary Jordan and Trevor Sneller have said publicly, but not in print, that in the light of this unmet need, Dorset's housing target should therefore be 39,000 homes, even though we believe there has been no formal request yet from either council. Could Dorset Council please confirm which of these two figures represents the council's housing target? And if it is the 30,481 homes, what does the 39,000 figure then represent? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I invite David Walsh to respond, please. David, where are you?
I'm very sorry, Chairman. I am Councillor David Walsh, Portfolio Holder for Planning. I would like to thank Mr Hardy for the opportunity to clarify a point that seems to be at the forefront of discussions on the Dorset draft local plan. National policy says that local planning authorities should be meeting the target for their area as established through the standard methodology, and that in addition, any needs that cannot be met within neighbouring areas should also be taken into account in establishing the amount of housing to be planned for. The consultation document for the local plan sets out a housing target of 30,481 homes over the plan period, based on the standard methodology. The document acknowledges, however, that that is not necessarily the final target figure. We do not yet have the formal requests from neighbouring councils to consider meeting some of their unmet needs, but this is a possibility. And it is also important to bear in mind that the target figure resulting from the standard methodology may change during the preparation of the plan, as for example, new affordability data becomes available. The standard methodology figure will become fixed at the time that the plan is submitted for examination, but up to that point, we will need to amend our target to accommodate such changes. So while the consultation document sets out a target of 30,481, this is not necessarily the final target figure, and we do not currently know what that figure will be. The figure of 39,285 is the sum of the housing supply set out in the consultation document. The housing supply and the housing target are two quite different things, and it is not being suggested that the target should be 39,285. However, the consultation document includes a supply that exceeds the currently assumed target, and this has to be done deliberately for a number of reasons. Firstly, we may need to increase or reduce the target as a result of changes to the statistics that form the inputs to the standard methodology. Secondly, as explained above, we may need to consider requests to meet some of the housing needs of neighbouring areas. Thirdly, this is a consultation, and we may well wish to make changes to the proposals as a result. These might involve taking out some of the potential development sites or reducing the estimates for their capacity, which would therefore reduce the supply. And finally, it is prudent to plan for a housing supply that exceeds the targets. Councils are continually required to be able to demonstrate a 5-year supply of land for housing, as if they do not, they are unable to give full weight to their local policies and must apply the national presumption in favour of sustainable development when considering applications. Changing circumstances, including market fluctuations, new constraints evidence, and infrastructure delivery issues, can affect the speed at which sites come forward for development and the number of homes eventually provided on them. If we are only just providing enough to meet our targets, then we can very quickly lose the 5-year land supply, therefore losing our local control over development. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, David. Next is a statement from Nicola Newman, and Matt Pross is going to read it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a statement from Nicola Newman, Chief Executive of Ansbury Guidance, and it's on item 19, tracking and support service for young people not in education, employment or training, options appraisal of potential models for delivery. And this is an exempt item, so we'll just be receiving this statement. I am CEO of Ansbury, the current externally commissioned provider. We evolved from Dorset Careers and Connections. This is my perspective on the impact of the current proposed service and funding changes, informed by my voluntary roles as a board member of Careers England, Dorset LEP, Dorset Chamber of Commerce, Dorset Skills Advisory Panel, and as a recent governor of the Swanage School. I would like councillors to be sure the proposed reductions are conscious and their impact is expected and planned for in these extraordinary times. NEET support and career guidance is an important tip of a large Dorset-wide employability system, invisible until it goes wrong. Early intervention in schools reduces NEET numbers, improves lives and reduces costs long term. 2021-2022 is a difficult year for all young people seeking further education, training and employment. They are the COVID generation who have had learning, exams, friendship and plans disrupted and constantly changed. Unemployment is expected to rise. Dorset's young people will need more support to plan their future in 2021-2022, but will get less than they've ever had. Career is an individual's journey through life, learning and work. It is where individual psychology and aspirations meet social structure. Research evidence confirms that professional, impartial career guidance has an observable impact on young people's progression. If vulnerable young people have no goals or plans they believe in, more will develop barriers to achieving long-term unemployment, poor mental health, addiction, crime, exploitation, county lines, homelessness. This will be a net cost to the council and society in increased social care, NHS, universal credit, housing and antisocial behaviour costs. But more importantly, young people will not be fulfilling their potential. The IAGT contract awarded in 2016 must end in 2021. I believe the decision has already been made to remove council funding for professional level 6 careers guidance for vulnerable young people, those with EHCPs in leaving care and or at risk of becoming NEET. And the proposal is to do the same for vulnerable NEET young people. This will negatively impact all these young people. This gap cannot be filled by the Careers Hub or unqualified enterprise advisors. Schools don't have sufficient funding or time to provide professional level 6 career guidance, even if technically it's their role to do so and Ofsted requires it. Missed learning is their current priority. Level 6 advisors are scarce and there is no supply service if school-based staff are absent due to ill health, maternity, caring responsibilities. Changes in funding and services this year will have wide negative impact. Dorset young people deserve better. Temporary COVID funding for 1 year could mitigate the transition and better enable a long-term plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Matt. Right, we've got no other, we've dealt with public participation. Next item is questions from members. And today we don't have any, no written questions today, colleagues. So as you move on to agenda item 6, which is the forward plan, you've all had the opportunity to have a look at it. It is a thing that moves, as you all know, on a regular basis as we populate it with new items coming forward for future cabinet agendas. Can we accept the report as drafted? Could I have a yes?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Now we're going to go into the substantive items today, and I will do what I always do, give the opportunity for the non-executive members who are with us this morning the chance to ask a question or make a comment after the report's been delivered and before I open it up for any debate with the cabinet. So just use the request to speak in the chat bar, and I'll give you the opportunity to contribute if you so wish. So the first item is agenda item 7, which is the Dorset Council Plan Q3 Performance Update. I'll hand over to Peter Wharf.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Peter Wharf, Portfolio Holder for Corporate Development and Change and Deputy Leader. This is the Council Plan Quarterly Performance Report, and this is the third report on performance against the Council Plan that has come to the Cabinet and therefore is open to public. It shows data from the period October to December, which is Q3, where it's available, and highlights where performance has improved and where it has declined and what we're doing about it. It is quite a rich data report, and therefore I will not be covering everything in detail, but what I would like to do is concentrate on the areas of concern and the areas where we believe there have been significant achievements. So in terms of areas concerned, the data shows that the number of children on a child protection plan rose every month during Q3. This is significantly higher than this time last year. Investigation is underway about the causes of the increase, and Children's Services is undertaking a review of initial child protection conferences to ensure the right children are subject to the right child protection plans. A second area of concern is the number of children in care has been a long-standing concern and remained higher than target during Q3, but it has improved significantly since then. The number of children coming into care in an unplanned way has dropped dramatically, and for the first time we see more children exiting our care than entering into our care, which is good, though it is still too high. Thirdly, the number of apprenticeships continued to decline. The target for 2019-20 was missed. This, however, reflects a national trend. In fact, Dorset is performing rather better than the national average, and the council continues to work with business to improve the creation and take-up of apprenticeships and to use apprenticeships to develop its own workforce. Moving on to where we believe there have been significant achievements. Q3 also saw several achievements. The council continued to deliver national business support grant schemes in response to COVID-19 and saw the launch of new additional restrictions grant. Many services also continue to work closely with voluntary and community sector organisations to support people through the pandemic. The number of households in temporary accommodation and the number of households in bed and breakfast both decreased, which was very positive, and several successful bids were made for external funding, including grants to support housing and environmental priorities. Appendix 2 of the report presents a proposed update to the Council Plan Performance Monitoring Framework. The proposed framework reflects new work completed since March 2020 to build the Council's performance framework and ensures that measures are closely aligned to the 5 priorities in the Council Plan. Thank you to members who contributed to this process across the piece. In the economic growth section, you can also see that we have started to differentiate between measures that we directly control and those we don't, measures that are essentially contextual. We will categorise all the measures in this way in future because it's a helpful distinction, and I thank Councillor Tony Ferrari for his work on this. If this revised framework is agreed, and I hope it will be, this will be built into the Power BI performance report, and our ambition is that this will be made available to members and the public at some time in the future. That will need to be planned, and I will report on that in due course. Thank you, Chairman. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Peter. I see no request to speak in the chat. Oh, there is one now from Councillor Paul Kimber. Paul.
Thank you, Spencer, and thank you, Peter, for your statement. as a former engineering apprentice, that I'm not quite sure when I finished my apprenticeship, but it does go on for many, many years. But I'm pretty well alarmed by that obviously apprenticeships are down, and I would ask that the Cabinet, under Councillor Peter Wolf's guidance, really focuses on this, given the question as well during the public period. So if I can make that request, that we give full energy to this. Our most important asset above all is our young people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and I agree with your point you've made. Brian Heatley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Brian Heatley, Councillor for Rodwell and Wyke. 3 quick points. First of all, to thank Councillor Wharf for taking up a suggestion I made about rights of way, where the measure we had was a measure which was really about council activity rather than the quality of the rights of way for users. And I see there is a placeholder for this now, which is an excellent development. I know it's going to be technically difficult to produce something, but I think that's really useful. I also see one has appeared for cycleways as well, which is good. Second point, there's thinking about cycleways and footpaths made me think about roads. And I look at our performance measures for roads, and there's one about verges and there's one about skid resistance, but there doesn't seem to be one about the quality of the road network as a whole, which I think is something which is of considerable concern for our residents, and I wonder whether something can be done about that. Third point, very pleased to see some carbon footprint measures appearing now in the placeholders. The really important thing for this area is the targets that are adopted. I personally think they're rather more important than the discussion we're going to have about 2030, 2040, 2050, because after all, in 2050, I don't think anyone on this call is going to be there to either defend or explain or celebrate our achievements or not. On the other hand, the target for 1 year, this year compared to last year, is something which we're all very involved in, and I'm looking forward to seeing what that target improvement is. I think we need figures of the order of 10%, which is pretty stretching, but that's the sort of thing that's important. And I do think some emphasis on immediate targets on climate change is very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brian. Peter, do you want? There are no other requests to speak. Do you want to pick up on those points, and then I'll open it up to the Cabinet?
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'll do that. The first thing is I'd like to, this sounds like an Oscar ceremony, but I'd like to thank Councillor Heatley for making what was an excellent suggestion related to rights of way and to cycleways, and we are attempting to incorporate them into the measures, even though they're going to be quite difficult. And this is one of the areas where our responses will be somewhat contextual rather than completely under our control. But nevertheless, I am grateful, and we will include it, and we will track it as we go along. And I would just like to take the point that if that was Brian Heatley was acting in his, I'm an individual member and I have a particular concern about this, and I will listen to any member, any concern. I can't guarantee we'll do something about it, but I can guarantee we'll take notice and we'll think about it, and if necessary, and if we can, we'll incorporate it in. In terms of his comments on carbon targets, I think that's worth consideration, and I'm going to go back to Councillor Ray Bryan, and we're going to think about what happens when the EAP moves over to an overview committee, and I think there's some work to be done. So I'm certainly not going to give him an answer, because that's going to take some time, and I wouldn't want to do this off the top of my head, but I think his comments are valid, and I will take it back to Councillor Bryan, and I may well talk to Councillor Darrell Turner as well to see how this can be incorporated into the thinking of the council moving forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Peter. I've got no others. Is there any member of the Cabinet wish to speak on this particular item? If not, I'll move to the recommendations. There's two recommendations. One is to note the progress, and the other one is to agree the amended performance framework. So can we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you, colleagues. Move on to agenda item 8 now. Dorset Heathlands Intramure Quality Strategy, and I'll invite Councillor David Walsh to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm Councillor David Walsh, Portfolio Holder for Planning. The need to mitigate the in-combination effect of nitrogen deposits of additional development upon the Dorset Heathlands designated sites has been triggered by several major planning applications in the BCP area. This has brought the issue into focus across all South East Dorset protected heathlands. Airborne nitrogen and ammonia gases from multiple sources, including agriculture and vehicle emissions, settle on heathlands, enriching the soil. After reading this report, you'll know that this favours faster growing plants and the spread of species not normally found on heathlands, which outcompete and inhibit the recovery of the characteristics protected heathland features. A strategy is needed to help address emissions caused by the additional car trips from new development. The proposed joint strategy with Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council in Appendix 1 provides interim mitigation measures in advance of the formal policy position in the emerging BCP Council and Dorset Council local plans. The strategy is required until at least 2030, when the take-up of electric-powered vehicles should negate the need for mitigation and improve air quality. Current council strategies such as modal shift will help, but targeted projects around heathland sites are also needed. A budget of £750,000 is needed for 5 years mitigation projects. £562,500 from BCP Council and £187,500 from Dorset Council, based on the proportions of planned development at £50 per home. The strategy will be paid for by developers from the Community Infrastructure Levy and planning obligations. The Property Management Group and Corporate Strategy Assets Management Group will be made aware of these requirements. So as I've outlined, there will be no cost to the Council, as projects should be funded through SIL or planning obligations. So, Chairman, because an interim strategy is needed to allow the Council to continue granting planning permissions for new development and facilitating growth, I would like to propose the recommendations before you.
Thank you very much, David. I'm just looking to see if I've got any requests to speak here. I don't see any in the chat box, in which case I will immediately go to Cabinet colleagues, because from what I can see, David, this is absolutely essential that we adopt this interim arrangement. But colleagues, any comments from Cabinet colleagues, or can we agree?
Agree.
Can we agree? Thank you very much. We go on to agenda item 9, which is Dorset and BCP Joint Local Transport Plan Development. And I'll hand over to Councillor Ray Bryan.
Thank you, Chairman. We're having a few IT problems at this end, so apologies if I break down halfway through. My name is Councillor Ray Bryan. I hold the portfolio for Highways, Travel and the Environment. Members, the current Dorset and BCP Local Transport Plan runs until 2026. So from a statutorily view, we don't need to do anything now. However, in this fast changing world we live in, my feeling is that we need to look forward and see what we can do to make it better. When we actioned the current LTP in 2011, we were a number of different councils and we did not have the same priorities that we have today. It's no secret that we are playing very heavily on health and well-being, active travel, and of course, along has come climate and ecological emergency declaration, and of course, COVID-19. There is a need to provide a shorter, more succinct strategy that is designed for the modern world. Working with BCP makes sense and gives us a much stronger voice when putting forward plans to obtain DFT funding. We all know that feeder roads run through both unitary councils and are essential for our economic growth. Working together, we can improve our road safety, walking and cycling, as can be seen by our Transforming Cities project. Better movement of freight, better public transport for rural areas, tackling congestion, tackling pollution. All of these are so important and have to form part of the new LTP plan. The cost of the exercise will depend on resources used to revise the LTP document, but this will be accommodated within our existing budgets. Approval from Cabinet today will enable Dorset Council to plan ahead, and I commend Cabinet. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ray. And can I reinforce your point about the importance of this particular piece of work here? I got a request to speak from Daryl Turner. Daryl.
Chairman, just let me get this document up. Excellent document, obvious what Ray's talked about. But as you're aware, we've been looking at methods of joint working across the various committees in Dorset Council. And I believe this paper highlights the need for more thought on joint policy development and joint scrutiny processes across both us and BCP. And I'll be grateful if this could be looked at moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daryl. I'll just hold that, Ray, and I'll take Paul Kimber, then I'll invite you back. Paul Kimber.
Yeah, thank you, Spencer. Thank you, Chair. My one concern that I'm getting a lot of feedback on is, as you know, between Bournemouth and Weymouth, at times in some areas by Dorchester, we've got a single line. Given if you like, the holiday industry in Weymouth and Portland, could I ask that we pressurise the rail authorities to dual that line, so we've got actually two lines? Thank you. I think this needs a lot of pressure. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Ray, would you like to come back on those 2 points?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. First of all, Councillor Turner raises some very important things, and I look forward to working with him to gain from his experience, having held this portfolio in the past. Darren and I have a very good working relationship, so I look forward to working with him on it. Picking up Paul's comment, Paul, we've had recent meetings with Network Rail, and there seems to be a change of attitude coming through from Network Rail. So I will take back to them your comment and try and come back with a good answer for you during the next few months. It's not going to be immediate, Paul, as you would expect. It takes time, but we will be working on it. Hopefully that answers your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. I've got a request to speak from John Andrews. John.
Yeah, thank you, Spencer. Excellent. We need to do this. It's been needed for a little while. I know it takes us to 2026 statutorily, but can I ask that we don't forget that we have links to other counties as well, not just Poole, Christchurch, and Bournemouth. We neighbour with Wiltshire, who has the 303 running through it, and it's very important. We have a strategy to look after the transport from there, and also with Somerset. Through the Crooker and etc., the old colleges, etc. So public transport's key on everybody's mind, so we need to have a look at that as well. But no, we definitely need to have a look at this. That's it.
Thank you, John. Ray, would you like to comment? Because I think that's very high on our agenda.
It is, as always, John, you make a very valid point. I am working closely with portfolio holders from Hampshire, Wiltshire, Somerset, and all of our neighbouring councils. And of course, being part of the South West Gateway does give us some influence as to the future of the road network. You're absolutely right, though. We need to work with our neighbours. It really is a collective problem for all councils. So I look forward to being able to report back to Cabinet at a future date on all the advances that we've made. But you make a very good point there, John.
Thank you, Ray. I've got a request to speak from David Took. David.
Thank you, Spencer. Thank you, Spencer. I don't know if this is the right place to ask this question or not, and I'll take guidance. But public transport, bus services in particular, local rural transport are suffering greatly at the moment. And have been for some time. In my own area, we have a 97 bus that is funded by parish councils to a large extent with help from community transport. And I'm just wondering if there are options to look at subsidising some of these bus routes that are more helpful for our older residents who don't have cars. Is this the right place to raise this, or is it something else we can talk about later?
You've raised it now, and if it isn't, we'll take note of it and deal with it somewhere else where it is. Ray, do you want to come back?
Yeah, sure. David, I can assure you there's lots of work going on behind the scenes at the moment. As you know, we had an EAP that looked at this. We're still considering the results from that, but we've got discussions now going with all the local bus companies, and conversations are going on behind the scenes as to what is the best way to deal with this going forward. It is an absolute priority for me to make sure that we give as many people as possible access to public transport, and I'll use that term loosely, because that way I get them off the roads, which fits in with my climate emergency agenda. So please be assured there's lots going on, and we'll be making some announcements hopefully in the next few weeks as to ways forward. But I meet with the bus companies later this week. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There are no other RTSs. So cabinet colleagues, are you content to? I think this is an really important piece of work here, and I'm very grateful to Ray and the officers who've pulled this plan development together. And hopefully we'll see the benefits of this going forward. So can we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Would you move on to agenda item 10 now? Dorset Council Tourist Information Centre service review, consultation responses, next steps, and I'll hand over to Councillor Jill Haynes. Jill.
Thank you, Chairman. Dorset Council area has 3 remaining tourist information centres. They're at Dorchester, Sherborne and Wareham. Tourist information is not a statutory service and currently costs the council £212,000 a year. We went out to consultation on the 19th of October as to what were the next steps for these tourist information centres. The consultation ran till the 3rd of January. We advertised on social media, survey was online, and we had paper copies in the tourist information centres and our 23 libraries. We had a good response. We had 990 responses. And we were looking to see what we should do going forward. It was obvious the service is extremely valued, and 81% of those who completed the consultation chose the option that we move forward with the towns and the voluntary sector in developing a local service. Councillors will be aware that the bulk of other tourist information centres have already gone to a local level, either with a town council or parish in some cases, or run by the voluntary sector. We will continue to run at a strategic level Visit Dorset, which is where most of our outside visitors will find their sources of information to start with. Well, obviously they Google, that's what we all do, and then they will find the Visit Dorset site, which gives great breadth to the activities and accommodation that's available in Dorset. That's something we're going to be working more closely on, particularly as we think there are going to be a lot more people doing England staycations and holidays, particularly after the COVID. We obviously recognise the importance of tourism to the local economy, and we need to work on this at a strategic level to ensure that our visitors continue to come and have the appropriate information. The paper looking to close these tourist information centres went through a full discussion at Overview Committee, which I was very grateful for. And I've also had meetings with all of the local members involved and separately with the 3 town councils along with officers. What we're looking to do now is move forward with how we might assist with that, and there will be some transitional money to assist them developing a local service. I therefore, Chairman, would like to come back to the 4 recommendations, which I'm hoping you will take in block, and put forward my support for this paper.
Thank you very much, Jill. We've got requests to speak from Les Fry. Les.
Morning, Chair. Thank you.
No, we can't hear you, Les.
Thank you for your time as a document. I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
The tourist information centres are documented as being in Dorset, Wareham and Sherborne. Reason A of the recommendation says there is a disparity in the service offered. I disagree. These centres support and offer information about events and activities across the whole of Dorset, much like a network with hubs. But society has moved on significantly with many of the services not now online, but the changes will still be a loss to our community. But let's be clear, the ratepayers in the towns pay considerably more than the rural areas. Dorset approximately £190 per person, local villages 40. So it is unfair for the towns to pick up the operating costs of the TIC when the benefits are across the whole of our area. But this does not mean it will not happen. And I'm fully aware that the interest, for example, in the Dorset Tourist Information Centre and Dorset Town Centre has in tourist information and is closely monitoring the situation and demand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Les. Jill, do you want to answer that question, or shall I take Paul Kimber first?
I wasn't too sure that was really, it was rather more a statement from Councillor Fry, I think.
Yeah, it was really.
Yeah. Councillor Kimber, and then I'll come back and have a look about both.
Yeah, Paul.
Thank you, Jill, and thank you, Spencer. I also have been getting a number of concerns from particularly Dorchester and Wareham about the closure of the TICs. And even at this 11th hour, I make the appeal, because not only do tourists use them, but local people use them. And for councils, it's a great way of getting information out there, not only around tourism, where to go, but different things that are happening in the community. And over the years, I've been well impressed with what the Dorchester TIC has done. I know we had this issue when I was on the Weymouth and Portland Borough Council, and again, it was I couldn't support it then, and I do appeal to you at this 11th hour to really reconsider what to put in place of, because particularly for our own communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I've got a couple of other requests to speak, Jill. Do you want to harvest them all and then come back with all of them? I think that makes sense, doesn't it?
I think that does. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. John Andrews and then Knock.
Yeah, thank you, Spencer. Just to reiterate what Jill said, there's been extensive consultation with the town councils, which I'm chairman of Sherborne. Well, I totally understand where we're going with this, because it is an unfair levy on our resources for 3 individual towns. Les has a very good point, and he says that we do support activities within the villages and the parishes around our towns, but we are where we are, and there is some support coming, a little bit of support coming. We're certainly still in consultation with Councillor Haynes. In fact, we've got a meeting with her on Friday, I think it is, Jill. But I would just say this has been done in a professional manner, and I don't believe we can carry on with it anymore to that extent. So it's a comment rather than a question, Spencer.
Thank you very much, John. Knock Lacey Clark.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Jill, for this comprehensive report. I just wanted to offer some reassurance to the other councillors. Being in North Dorset ward that I represent, we went through this process in the past, and actually we still have a very successful tourist information centre, which is run partly by the town council, but mostly by the voluntary sector. And actually it still operates very well, and so I wouldn't be too worried by this process. It's creating parity within Dorset, and actually where you have the need for TICs, I have very much confidence in the voluntary sector to keep them going and to bring them into the new age.
Thanks for your comments, Knock, really helpful. David Took.
Thanks, Spencer. Yes, I appreciate the issues here, and they are expensive to run. What concerns me a little bit is if they don't get support and the load is thrown back onto the town councils, they may not be able to pick it up fully, and there's a danger that these will close. And I appreciate Knox's comments about the voluntary sector being heavily involved. But is there something that can be done online to link all of the different areas of Dorset tourism together so that there is a single point of contact online that will fill the role that the TICs do in the individual towns, but do it more comprehensively? And is that something as a council that we would be involved in assisting with in some way?
All right, David, thank you for that. I'll ask Jill to come back now and pick up the points. That's certainly a question.
A series of points here. What I want to make quite clear is that this is Dorset Council closing 3 tourist information centres. This is not Dorset Council stopping supporting tourism. And we have a very active online team working on Visit Dorset. We also are still in the process of negotiations with the town councils and, to be quite frank, local tourism businesses to see how we might move this forward, because it's been done very successfully in other areas, as Councillor Lacey-Clark has said, and there are a number of options open to us, but we're not at that stage yet. We're moving forward, but I am asking you Cabinet to agree this today, because we do need to balance the books for our budget next year. You know how tight we are on funding, and I unfortunately had to look at areas that were not statutory, and that's one of these.
Okay, thank you very much, Jill. I've got no other request to speak. Cabinet colleagues, what I would say here is that, again, I think we've had the benefit, as Jill touched on earlier, of this report being looked at by the overview committee. I certainly welcome the cross-party support for what we got, the 4 recommendations we've got before us today. So can we agree?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Move on to agenda item 11, the Youth Executive Advisory Panel. I'll hand over to Councillor Andrew Parry.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Andrew Parry, Cabinet Member responsible for children education, skills and early health. Chairman, thank you for letting us bring the Youth EAP report to Cabinet. Whilst the recommendations are for noting, given the approach adopted in its compilation with a wide level of input from members across the Council and interest from our communities, I felt it warranted highlighting to Cabinet colleagues. You will recall that the youth provision across the county had been subject to considerable structural change following a decision by our predecessor authority a number of years ago. The EAP has had the opportunity to assess this situation, and where gaps in provisions still exist, notably on the Isle of Portland and to some extent in the area of Upton, and how with the resources we have available, in particular those youth clubs that were subject to transfer agreements to town, parish councils and charitable trusts, how they could be better assisted as we emerge from lockdown. The EAP has highlighted a number of recommendations, in particular the repurposing of £100,000 previously described as crowd to serve in a more targeted way, prioritising those former youth clubs, enabling them the opportunity to hit the ground running. Chairman, I would in particular like to thank Councillor Kirby for agreeing to chair the Youth EAP. Indeed, he is present today and you may wish to invite him to address Cabinet. But also thank our councillors and officers whose efforts have gone into recreating this report and the contents of which I warmly welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. We got a few requests to speak. The first one is Claire Sutton.
Thank you, Spencer. Morning, everyone. As part of the EAP, I'd just like to say what an incredibly constructive experience it was. You know, big thank you to everyone that participated. But there are a few areas of concern. First of all, in 11.4, page 238, it says that 19 of the previous youth centres are still running. And obviously, excuse me if this sounds parochial, but obviously I've got my local knowledge to draw upon. And in Weymouth and Portland Youth Centre, Southall Youth Club, which is now a Wellbeing Centre, the Courts and Chickerell have all closed. So I suppose my question on that is, if there are 4 or arguably 3 that have closed in Weymouth and Portland, does that mean that the number's wrong, or does that mean that all the closures were in Weymouth and Portland? So that's the first one. The second one is the repurposing of the 100,000. That's extremely welcome, and also the simple grant making process. But I'm a bit concerned if that's going to be only targeted at former predecessor council youth community centres, because obviously there were voluntary sector organisations that may also need support. And also, I suppose I'm a bit concerned that the better organised youth clubs, youth centres, it will be much easier for them to apply, whereas you know, some of the neediest areas, organisations or latent organisations that don't even exist at the moment might need some help. And thirdly, just turning to Portland, you know, obviously we all identified that that's where the biggest gap is. So obviously it's not just Portland Youth Centre that closed, there is also Islanders and I think the Eastern provision. So the focus on Portland is hugely welcome. I just wanted to get some kind of indication of timescale there. So I'm sorry, Andrew, that's 3 all in one, but thanks.
Can I invite Andrew to respond to Claire's questions, please?
In some parts of this, I may have to give you a written response because I want to ensure that they will actually correct. I would certainly highlight that some of those former county council youth clubs do reside in the Christchurch area, which of course is no longer part of Dorset Council's area. So let me just double check on the information, and I will give you a written response on that. In respect of Portland, I very much want to hit the ground running on this. I will be scheduling, if this report is adopted by Cabinet and approved, I would like to schedule some meetings with the local members there, and in order for us to really understand what it is they want to see delivered and their community want to see delivered. It's got to be on a co-partnership basis on anything that we do going forward on Portland. In respect of prioritisation of £600,000 funding, we are not excluding anybody from bidding for that funding, but we do recognise that those former county council youth clubs weren't eligible necessarily in previous funding rounds. Therefore, we wanted to give them some sort of priority in this current with this current amount of money that we have in the budget.
Thank you. Thanks.
Claire Shields.
Thank you, Councillor Flower. Just to respond on the details of those former Dorset County Council Youth Centre premises, Claire, and the 22 relates to those former premises that were run or owned or leased by the council rather than youth centres in more general. So that's why there's a discrepancy in the numbers, but I can give you the detail outside. So those 22 refers to former council owned or leased premises, and some of those that you mentioned weren't owned or leased by the council.
Thanks, Claire. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarity, Claire. Paul Kimber.
Thank you, Spencer, and thank you, Claire, for updating us. And also, I'm making this again. I seem to be making lots of appeals this morning, but the Portland situation. Young people did ask me, and I had a socially distanced meeting, and I gave a commitment that the council, the Dorset Council, will do something about youth clubs. As you know, we had a fantastic youth club at the Royal Manor site. I'm not saying it because I was the chair of it, but a lot of effort went into it. A lot of volunteers worked in there, and it was so sad because when it lost, we seemed to lose it straight away. So I welcome your efforts this morning when you're talking about Portland to try and do much more to get provision for youth going once again. And I appeal to all of us. It's not a party political thing. We've got to really get behind our young people, because they've taken the brunt over the last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I didn't see Paul's question. It was more of an appeal.
No,
I'll go on to Andrew Kirby. Just deal with Andrew, and then we'll come back. Andrew Kirby.
Yeah, that's it. Do with me. Thank you, Chair. Just to go back to Councillor Claire Sutton's point regarding 11.1 and the funding. Claire almost answered her own question there with looking at why this is being pushed towards the former maintained ones, and she's absolutely right. It's more because the more established national youth organisations were able to get in there first, whilst we know that a few of the youth organisations that had a very short timeline and weren't even able to establish themselves as charities and therefore apply. But again, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Parry, thank you, Andrew. I'm going to, as Chair of the EAP, I'm just going to put some words in. So I believe I've speak for many that it was that the whole EAP and today is quite a cathartic process. We know the youth transfer has been quite difficult, and there were many issues caused by the former Dorset County Council. However, there are many successes, and today is not about vindication or dragging up the past. This is about our young people and how we support our young people to become grown-ups and well-rounded adults, and that's the most important thing. And how do we support our voluntary youth sector to be able to do that? So I'm not going to go through the paper and highlight the recommendations, but as Claire's already mentioned 11.1 and the grants that are coming down, my feeling and the feeling of many of the EAP is that it's not just going to be about grants. Grants are lovely, and don't get me wrong, it's brilliant. But sometimes some organisations chase grants, and that's wrong, and it brings about the wrong outcomes. For me, it was about ensuring that the remaining youth services and other youth services remain sustainable, especially in these difficult times. And therefore, that can only be done under joint commissioning and working together. So working with Dorset Council and working with other partners. And I'm really pleased to see that's in there. And I'm also really pleased to see in recommendation 6 that there's the mention of the community infrastructure levy being spent on younger people, and I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. So I won't waffle on, because the other members have brought up some really good points in terms of Portland and Upton and the work that we will continue to do to ensure those young people are supported. But what I will quickly do is just thank those members on the EAP, and I ask you as Cabinet to invest in our young people, because in a few years' time they'll be running the council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Before I hand over to Andrew Parry, can I also thank you for the work you've done along with the EAP. Andrew, do you want to come back? Andrew Parry.
Thank you. Just very briefly, Chair. My gratitude to Councillor Kimber for everything he does to promote facilities and support for children and young people on the island of Portland. It is well documented over many years that he has shown an interest in this area and doing everything he possibly can for his community. We are going to have to work with the community and appeal to the community to come forward, because as Councillor Kirby says, a lot of the solutions to youth provision actually rely in a sort of co-partnership approach to achieve the very best outcomes. It isn't purely about bidding for funding. It has its place, but it's also about finding different ways to enable us to work for the betterment of the communities.
Thank you, Andrew. Molly Rennie.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrew, for both Andrews, Andy and Andrew, for what you've said. And working on the EAP, as Claire said, was a privilege, because it was an excellent piece of work done with a can-do attitude, which was very obvious that we were wanting to support the work, because a lot of work has been done already to continue the youth clubs and the youth centres. I do have a question here within it. We had a draft document which was about our targeted youth workers, because Dorset Council have employed some targeted youth workers, and we spent quite a lot of time talking about their role and how they were going to interact, especially with the established youth clubs that have got workers already. And I just wondered where we were with the draft. The final document was still a draft when I last saw it. And as we're not meeting again, I wanted to be sure that it is as we thought it was going to be, talking about working with, supporting, rather than doing to. Claire, I was just going to suggest Claire probably can tell me if the draft is no longer a draft.
Andrew, do you want Claire to come in, or do you want to come in?
Very much so. I think Claire Shields will be the best person to respond to that question.
Okay, Claire.
Councillor Rennie, yeah, thank you, Councillor Rennie. Absolutely, the draft is now off, and all of your feedback and comments have been incorporated, so it's absolutely as you intended. And we're in the process of working with the targeted youth workers to roll that out, so it'll be ready for you to sign imminently.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Thanks for that response, Claire. Really helpful. Les Fry.
Thanks, Spencer. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you. I welcome this report and the support that Dorset Council is offering our young people and the excellent work that our youth centres and the brilliant youth workers are doing. It has also been good to work cross-party to support the youth service, and I welcome the opportunity to fill in the gaps of youth provision across Dorset. I think that'll be excellent for our young people. I would also like to ensure that this £100,000 is spent on future youth work and not to rectify the errors in Dorset County Council's handling of the transfer of our youth services across. For example, in the case of Dorset, there are some outstanding building defects, significant ones, which the trustees would like resolved as we move forward. So I want to see this money spent on future work and not to pick up past errors, which I would still like to hold Dorset Council to account for to resolve those issues, please. And that's not just Dorset, it's other centres as well, I believe.
Thank you, Les. Andrew, I'm going to turn that into a slight question here.
Yeah.
Can you give Les that reassurance?
Absolutely. I very much view the funding available to be an out of lockdown funding, not a rectification of issues related to transfer of youth clubs to town and parish councils. As it happens, the Dorchester Youth Club has a particular issue set around it, including a certain part of the building that I understand to be listed. I have had discussions with officers about that, and I do hope that we can find a way of resolving those difficulties sooner rather than later, Les, and let's schedule something post this meeting to really understand what's going on there.
Andrew, thank you. I welcome your response and support for that. And it's not just our centre, it's across it. There are other areas that Dorset County Council could have done a better job, but let's move forward. We have a positive response here. We have an excellent youth services, and I just want to see that supported and for the benefit of our young people. So thank you for your response. It is appreciated.
Yeah, well said, Les, and thank you, Andrew. Tony Coombs.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. Again, full support for the report. I just wanted to give perhaps just a local view on this. For me, the timing of this report is absolutely fantastic. I'm fronting the working party with Vowood Town Council to try and get Vowood Youth Centre back up and running. It's been unused and unloved for about 2 years, and we took over the lease the week before Christmas, and I'm spending every waking moment writing policies and everything else to get it up and running. And we have a youth worker that is just about to start work. So what I also wanted to say was there was a mention about the targeted area youth workers, and I want to pass back to senior management how fantastic the help that we have had from our local targeted area youth worker in the East in helping us move this forward. And we have done so much that we're actually able to open one night a week for a small group for targeted youth work at the moment. So thank you to everybody for all their help in the transfer and all the work behind the scenes on getting the building up and running. It's my way of saying thank you to everybody.
Thank you very much, Tony. Molly, you want to come back quickly? Andrew, sorry, you want to comment?
I was just going to say in response to Councillor Coombs and yourself, and of course Councillor Gibson, I appreciate the huge amount of effort that has gone on in the Verwood ward in order to re-establish a youth provision there. I have had a number of conversations with Councillor Coombs, who has approached this with her usual gusto and determination that this should happen in a timely manner. And I have, of course, indicated to her my wish to come and visit the relaunched youth club facilities as soon as we're permitted to do so.
Thank you, Andrew. And it's worth saying that this is, quite a, for the town council, quite a financial commitment to us, because it's the right thing to do.
Very much so.
Right, I've got Molly. Do you want to come back quickly?
Yes, it's very quick. Just for Andrew, he mentioned he would organise a meeting with Les. Could you please invite all Dorchester members, because all Dorchester members except for one are heavily involved with the youth centre there, and an offer of help for Tony. Tony, we would happily share our policies to save you all of that work, rewriting policies if you would like them, because again, we were a supported youth club by the town council, and we've done our policies, so they're there if you just want to email me if you'd like them.
Thank you very much, Molly, for that kind offer. I'm sure Tony will be talking to you outside the meeting. Right, colleagues, I think we're more. Andrew, do you want to say anything finally? Because we've had some good questions on this topic, actually.
Absolutely, and it's really really refreshing. No, it's not refreshing, is the wrong word. It's really encouraging that we have emerged from the EAP with a very clear direction that we want to go in our youth provision and our youth offer, and that we are all excited by the opportunities that we have for our children and young people as we emerge from lockdown. We recognise that a lot of them are going to require additional support. And some of that will be can be clearly provided inside the framework of a youth club environment. The report, as is stated, is for noting, but I would hope that Cabinet would want to warmly endorse it.
Thank you, Andrew. I certainly want to say that this demonstrates the quality of cross-party working when we have executive advisory in developing our policies and our strategies. This is an excellent example of the work that we've done on that, and it's an important topic, isn't it? So thank you very much. Cabinet colleagues, and want to add any of this particular debate, or are we happy to note, as Andrew said, note the report before us?
Ray,
Brian. Ray?
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm here. This report is absolutely fantastic, and I'm so encouraged by the words that Councillor Parry has said this morning, because one of my biggest concerns is, as we come out of lockdown, the effect that lockdown has had on the youth. And we have to remember that everything we do is for their future. So this is a massive step in the right direction, and I thank Andrew and the team for producing this, and it has my total support. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, well said, Ray, and I think that sentiment would be shared by members across the virtual chamber. So I did hear agreed just now, so I don't intend to revisit that. My request to note the report. We'll move on to agenda item 12, procurement forward plan report, and this is for Gary Suttle. Good morning, Gary.
Morning, Chairman. Thank you. As you know, in the budget that we recently agreed, procurement and the success of procurement will be key to enable us to keep to the budget figures. And part of the budget process was that we would not agree any inflationary in procurement. And so procurement is incredibly important. And today I bring to Cabinet a number of contracts which we seek to begin the process of agreeing for the coming years. These are actually listed in Appendix 1, and you'll see that they have quite a significant range from £706,000 up to £42 million, and from 4 years terms up to 7 years. And these are absolutely critical for the coming years for our budget to be able to be successful. So anything that is over £500,000 must come to Cabinet, and that is why we're here today. And there are two recommendations that I seek your support for. One is to begin each of the procurement processes listed in Appendix 1. And the second is that in each instance, the further step of making any contract award should be delegated to the relevant Cabinet portfolio holder after consultation with the relevant executive director. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Gary. I don't see any requests to speak. Oh, I've got one now. Daryl Turner. Daryl.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, my comment comes from the fact we need to factor in climate change to the decisions on procurement as soon as possible, and before we make these long-lasting decisions. I think we need to make sure it becomes a major factor in all our decision making moving forwards. And I wonder if Gary would consider a possible procurement policy review in the very near future. I think we need one. I think it's something that Overview could look at, and we could make those changes necessary to ensure climate change is factored in. Thank you.
Thank you, Darryl. That's a really good point. Gary, do you want to come back?
Yes, I really want to stress that climate, as I've said in the past, is very important, and is definitely part. I'll just coming to the report. If you look at item 4, climate implications, and 4.1, it does state to be considered by the appropriate project team as part of a business case and rationale for each procurement. So it is in there. It is part of a process. Happy to talk to Darryl, maybe through scrutiny process or whatever, about a more robust policy if he feels it's necessary. But I know, working with Councillor Bryan, that all of these procurement items on the list will be considered in the light of climate change.
Thank you, Gary. Before I go to Jill, who's obviously a member of the Cabinet, are there any other non-executive members wishing to speak on this item? I don't see any, so I'm going to go to Jill. Jill.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a point of clarification on Appendix 1. It has my portfolio down for things like tyres and heating and fuel oil and vehicle parts, and that's not in my portfolio. I might have the waste services, but I don't have the maintenance of the bins.
Is that something to note, Gary?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for the observation, Jill. Okay, thanks. Peter Wharf.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if Gary Suttle would like to comment on. We have an issue, particularly in IT, where because we are leading on a number of projects and acting as the project manager or project coordinator, and we're using a number of external agencies, what happens is that the finances for the complete project come through Dorset Council, and this can sometimes mean that the amount of finance that we are responsible for in terms of our own work is often quite small, but the total project cost is quite large. Because of the success we've had with a variety of IT projects, particularly 5G, government are talking about giving us additional work, and we need to move fast in order to be able to take advantage of this. In some cases, it's because government wants to do things before the end of the financial year. Let's not discuss the sense or otherwise of that. But one of the things this paper does, I believe, gives us an opportunity to take advantage of these opportunities whilst ensuring that the relevant people are involved, and it will go back to scrutiny at an appropriate time. I wonder if Gary would like to comment on that. Thank you, Chair.
Good point, Peter. Gary, do you want to come back?
Thanks for that, Peter. I think agile working in procurement is particularly important, and the items that you've raised, particularly through IT, they're not in this list today, but I do appreciate what you've said, and I will take it back and talk to both Aidan and Jim about how we can facilitate any speeding up of process.
Thank you very much for that response, Gary. I don't see any other Cabinet member wish to comment on this report, or can we agree the two recommendations? Can we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Agenda item 13, review of redundancy multiplier and exit pay cap update. I'll hand over to Peter Wharf.
Thank you, Chairman. This report is to change the plan such that the current redundancy multiplier of 1.7 be extended for a further 12 months. A further review of the redundancy multiplier takes place towards the end of 2021 rather than effectively now, to ensure any agreement of a new rate of redundancy multiplier from, say, 1st of April 2022 takes into consideration really three things. One is any potential reintroduction of an exit pay cap. The second is any potential reforms to the local government pension scheme. And the third is the outcome of the hopeful ending of the pandemic and the effect on this. And all of those, it makes sense to delay any review until a year's time. Thank you very much, Chairman. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. We got one from Paul Kimber. Paul.
Thank you, Spencer, and thank you, Peter. Peter, the question I wanted to ask is our redundancy multiplier in line with other local authorities, or are we about average? Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Peter?
I'm happy to answer that, but I give my answer with the caveat that I will come back with a clearer answer doing some research. Our redundancy multiplier is generally slightly more generous than others, but there are so many other factors affecting it that I'm not sure that that is a sensible metric. So I would just give you the answer. It's not wildly out of kilter, and I think it's mildly generous, but we live in such uncertain times that the most sensible thing to do is not to consider rationalising it that we were thinking, but to wait for another year until we're through the pandemic. And you will also notice that the exit pay cap has recently been ditched, which would have led to some fairly major problems, but they may well reintroduce it. That's they being the government. So all of these factors mean that we're just not sure. So that's a rather fuller answer than you asked for, but I think we are in a reasonable place, but it just makes sense to wait. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Peter, for that. I can't see anybody else looking to request to speak. So Cabinet colleagues, two recommendations. Are we happy to agree? Agreed. Thank you very much.
You.
Now we've got recommendations from committees. We've got one today, which was from the Dual Archive Service, a review of fees and charges, and I'll hand over to Jill Haynes.
Is it working? I think it is. I did manage to get back again. I think we're all having a bit of IT crisis today with the cameras and things. I haven't really got very much to add to this paper, just to say that we have an excellent joint archive service that we work with BCP. These are some modest additions to the fees that we charge. We obviously need that money to continue to support the service, and it was approved by the whole of the joint board, so I have no more to say on that.
Thank you very much, Jill. I think it is, as you say, pretty straightforward. It's set out in the report very well. We've got no request to speak from non-executive colleagues. So Cabinet colleagues, anybody wish to contribute? Or are you happy to agree?
Agreed.
Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much, everyone. Let's go on to agenda item 15, which is Cabinet member update on policy development matters that we may have referred to at one of the overview committees. And I do know that two colleagues wish to speak on this, Jill Haynes and Laura Miller. So Jill first, if I may.
Just, Chairman, that later in the month we are going to be having a look at the report through overview committee, the place overview committee, with Councillor Turner at some of the findings of the APSI report, and I suspect coming from that there then will be some policy areas that will need to be reviewed. So it's just to flag that up.
Thank you, Jill. Laura, I think you had something to contribute to this item.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Laura Miller, Cabinet Member, Adult Social Care and Health. Just a couple of items that I want to mention that will be coming forward in the next couple of month or two. we're working very hard on our home first model, which means that people are discharged from hospital and they go into their own homes, not into a care setting. We want to make sure that people have more support closer to home, they have their own front door, and that's really important work that's happening at the moment. We're also, Councillor Simon Gibson's leading some work on our day opportunities, running a really big, really open consultation at the moment about what people want, what they want to do during the day. It's as simple as that. People that use our services, what do they want to do during the day? And that work will be coming forward through the system over the next month or two. And it's really, really important that we keep everyone up to speed on it because it's absolutely vital work. So I just wanted to highlight those two areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Both really, really important areas of work. Any other colleagues wish to comment on this particular agenda item? If not, I take silence as no. So I'll move on to agenda item 16, Climate and Ecological Emergency Executive Advisory Panel update. Ray Bryan.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, let's start with the consultation process, which the main consultation process ran its full period. And so far, bearing in mind that the shorter version is still going until the 31st of March this year, and that was our intention. We've had over 3,000 responses. The good news is, out of those responses, over 80% have agreed with dates for the 2040 date for Dorset Council's activities, and obviously 2050, which is the date set by the government for everything else that we can help with within the DC area. Can I also point out that the scrutiny, the document that we've produced, the action plan, and is all a living document. This will change many times over the period as we tweak things, but this of course will be passed on to overview for them to deal with. The EAP will have one more meeting, and then it's my intention to ask Darryl as chairman of the overview committee to take it forward. A little bit of update on what's been happening is I attended a hydrogen meeting with a gentleman called Bim Ofalami, who is an MP. He was in the chair, and he was acting on behalf of Lord Debon, who was the chair of the Committee on Climate Change. We are also now members of APPG, which is the All-Party Parliamentary Group, and PRASAG, which is the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Renewable and Sustainable Energy. I think it's important that people understand that although the strategy and action plan are now in place, it still has a big part to play, because we've received some fantastic comments from government as to the quality of those two documents. There's a lot of items on the agenda for both House of Commons and also the House of Lords this week, which revolves around climate change. And it's worthwhile every now and again looking at what's going on in central government, because it gives an indication as to what's going to be coming down the line. At the hydrogen meeting, I got educated on green versus blue hydrogen. And it's interesting that obviously, from my point of view, the green hydrogen is absolutely essential. I also learned that both Hyundai and Toyota are producing hydrogen cars. And obviously this will have an effect on our thinking on electrical vehicles. They're not available in the UK yet, but I wouldn't think it's too far away. I've had meetings with Cadent Gas Network and ENA, which is the Energy Network Association. I've had meetings with Worcester Bosch, who are the developers of the boilers in our households. And it's interesting that Worcester Bosch have already developed a boiler that is suitable to take hydrogen in the future. It will currently deal with natural gas, and there is a small conversion that would need to take place for it to become hydrogen efficient. I'm also having discussions on wind farms, and this is something that is going to be picking up speed as we look at offshore wind farms. And I think it's absolutely essential that we participate in these discussions. It would be remiss of me if I didn't mention the 19 million grant that I mentioned at the last cabinet. And there's some great work being done by the working group. We've had tremendous support from all sections of the council, including procurement, property, waste, finance, plus many, many others. And I would like to point out that in our assembly of the action plan, lots of areas of the council took part, and there were some very large meetings going on. And this is all in addition to their normal work. I think it's absolutely fantastic, the support that I've received in trying to get climate change and our sort of working correctly in favour of the council. I'm going to probably break some rules here, but I'm going to make special mention of Matt Reeks, Anthony Littlechild, Wendy Carmichael and James Potton, who have put up with my ever-increasing demands as well as dealing with their day-to-day work. I do hope my chair at County Hall next to theirs is still in place, because I look forward to being able to go back to it in the very near future. I'm also going to give my thanks to Mark Simons for his tremendous work on the consultation. My thanks also to Jason Greatbanks, who is heading up this massive project of trying to spend 19 million and have the everything in place by the end of September. And can I remind everybody that it's September this year. Last but not least, my thanks go to the cross-party executive advisory panel who helped create the strategy and action plan that has been so well received in government circles. I'll sum up by mentioning that we were granted, the first tranche was 298,000, the second tranche is 18,791,674, which £1 million, which equates to 36% of the money that was actually granted. We are in the process of producing shovel-ready bids, ready for future grants. We are on our way to becoming carbon neutral by 2040 or earlier. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ray. Really good summary and a good update for colleagues. I've got one question from Paul Kimber.
Thank you, Spencer, and thank you, Ray. Ray, if I could ask you a question on the hydrogen and especially, as you said, the Bush boilers. Is there any consideration about how we get will it be pipelines laid through to all our houses to take hydrogen, or will it come in a separate way? I'm thinking of the old days of central heating when everybody had their own tank for this. So if you can give us any outline of how and what should we be prioritising on regarding hydrogen. Thank you.
Ray?
Only too pleased to, because one of the things that absolutely amazed me at the hydrogen meeting is there's work already going on 136,000 miles of pipework, so that hydrogen can go through the pipework. I understand that the method they're using is to sleeve the existing pipework, which obviously will enable all this to happen properly. But as I say, with the advance on both automotive and obviously heavy commercial vehicles, rail, public transport, the buses, hydrogen is something that I'm absolutely convinced will be a major part in us achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. Hopefully that answers your question, Paul.
Thank you, Ray. Peter Wharf.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if Councillor Bryan would like to answer the question related to how our neighbouring authorities have done in terms of grants, because we've achieved 36% of the total grant across the local authority region. How have our neighbouring authorities done? Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Now you've got me embarrassed, haven't you? If I take our neighbouring councils, Somerset received 7,000. I'm now
million, you mean?
No, 7,000.
£7,000.
Yep. The next closest to us, just as a matter of interest, is Leicester, who received 8.3 million, and the next closest to that is actually Devon County Council, who received 4.6 million. And I just think it highlights the exceptional work that the team have done in getting this money. One thing I would like to add, and it wasn't relevant to your question, can I just point out the pressure that this puts on people like procurement, who have got to work within the local government rules and yet get us supply of product so that we can do the adaptation work to our buildings and obviously other buildings within Dorset. But yeah, it's something I'm very proud of, Peter, and we should be very proud as a council of the achievement.
Without wishing to crow, could you just, sorry, through you, Chair, can you just tell me what BCP have managed to achieve in this particular grant round?
They didn't.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. I think that's sufficient. But thank you very much, Ray. It's a really, really good overview of what's been the progress, and I think as a council, we should all be very proud of having declared the emergency, what we've done since then to get to where we are now. So great update. I'm going to take David Taylor and then I'm moving on. David Taylor.
I'm very impressed with this. This is incredible work. Ray, honestly, it's just incredible what you've achieved. I'm sitting here thinking, I don't believe this. It's absolutely beautiful work. Well done. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, David. I'm sure Ray will be very grateful for your comments and support. Right, colleagues, we move on to agenda item 17, which is urgent items. There aren't any. So we go on to agenda item 18, and we're going to need to move into exempt business. Can I have a proposer and seconder, please?
Chairman, can I propose that we move to exempt business?
Thank you very much.
I'm happy to second that, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Graham. All agreed?
Agreed.
Right, well, in closing, then, thank you very much to any members of the public who attended our meeting today. I hope you found it interesting and enlightening. And we're going to now log out of this particular meeting and log into an exempt item, which will take place in a few minutes. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Let's move over.